I stood in our driveway, watching my sister drive away in my car, the one I had saved 3 years to buy. My father's words still ringing in my ears. She deserves it more than you do. My paycheck stub still taped to my bedroom wall, tracking every dollar I had earned. I knew something was wrong the moment I pulled into my parents' driveway. The space where my Honda Civic should have been parked was empty. I scanned the street, thinking perhaps someone had moved it, but the familiar blue sedan was nowhere in sight. "Mom?" I called, letting myself into the house I'd grown up in but no longer lived in full-time. "Dad? Where's my car?" My mother appeared from the kitchen, a strange expression on her face, something between guilt and defiance. "Audrey," she said, her voice deliberately light. "We didn't expect you until tomorrow." I finished my finals early. I set my backpack down, that uneasy feeling intensifying. "Where's my car?" My father emerged from his study, exchanging a look with my mother that confirmed my growing suspicion. Something was very wrong. "Why don't you sit down?" he suggested, gesturing to the living room. I remained standing. "I'd rather you just tell me what's going on with my car." Another exchanged glance. Then my mother sighed. Tara needed reliable transportation for her internship and activities. The commute is 40 minutes each way, and our cars aren't fuel efficient enough for a student budget. I stared at her, processing what she wasn't explicitly saying. "You gave my car to Tara? She has her hospital volunteering, debate team practices, and now this research internship," my father added, as if this explained everything. "The opportunity is too important for her future. She needs reliable transportation." "That's my car," I said, my voice steady despite the shock pulsing through me. "I paid for it. With my own money." "We know you did, honey," my mother said in the placating tone she'd used since I was a child. "But you're living on campus now. You don't really need it. Tara does." "I'm home for the entire summer," I reminded them. "I have my job at the bookstore starting Monday. I need my car." "You can use the bus," my father said dismissively. "It runs right past the bookstore. Or your mother can drop you off on her way to work." I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm despite the rising sense of violation. "Did you even consider asking me before giving away my property?" My mother's expression hardened slightly. "Audrey, it's just a car. Tara deserves this opportunity, and she needs reliable transportation to make it work. Sometimes in a family, we make sacrifices for each other. She deserves it more." My father's words landed like a physical blow. This internship could define her entire career path. I looked between them, these people who had raised me, suddenly seeing something I'd spent years trying not to notice, the fundamental imbalance in how they valued their daughter's needs, dreams, and property. "I worked 3 jobs last year to save for that car," I said, my voice still remarkably steady. "I paid for it myself. My name is on the title." "The title is in the glove compartment," my mother responded, missing the point entirely. "And we added Tara as an insured driver last week." Last week. They'd planned this, prepared for it, executed it, all without a single conversation with me, the car's owner. "Where's Tara now?" I asked. "At her internship. She won't be home until around 7. My mother glanced at the clock. "Are you hungry?" I was about to start dinner. The casual shift, as if we'd been discussing something as trivial as a borrowed sweater rather than the theft of my most valuable possession, was surreal. "No," I said. "I'm not hungry." I picked up my backpack and headed for the stairs, needing space to think, to process what had just happened. Behind me, I heard my mother call out, "Audrey, don't be dramatic about this. It's for Tara's future." In my childhood bedroom, now more guest room than personal space, I sat on the edge of the bed and let the reality sink in. My car, the one I'd saved for by working at the campus bookstore, waiting tables on weekends, and tutoring other students during finals period, was gone. Given to my younger sister because her activities were deemed more important, her future more valuable, her needs more pressing than mine. My hands shook slightly as I took out my phone, scrolling to the album where I kept important documents. There it was, a photo of the title, listing me as the sole owner. Proof that what my parents had done wasn't just unfair, it was illegal, As the shock began to crystallize into something harder and more focused, my phone buzzed with a text from Tara. Hey. Mom said you're home early. Can you help me with something for the internship tomorrow? No mention of the car. No acknowledgement that she was driving what I had worked so hard to earn. Either she was oblivious or complicit. Neither option painted a flattering picture of my sister. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my laptop and began researching what to do when someone takes your vehicle without permission. The word appeared on the screen, stark and undeniable. Theft. My parents had stolen my car and given it to my sister because she deserves it more. The familiar pattern snapped into focus. Tara's dance classes prioritized over my academic competitions. Her school trips funded while I worked for my extracurriculars. The constant messaging that her dreams required nurturing while mine required self-sufficiency, but this was different. This wasn't about emotional support or encouragement. This was about something tangible, something that legally belonged to me, something I had earned through my own hard work. I closed my laptop and looked around the room that had once been my sanctuary. Family photos lined the dresser. Tara center stage at her recital, me slightly out of frame. Tara's graduation, front and center. My high school graduation photo, smaller, tucked behind others. The car was just the latest, most egregious example of a pattern that had defined my entire life. I picked up my backpack and quietly left the room. Downstairs, I could hear my parents in the kitchen, their voices low but unconcerned. They expected me to accept this, as I had accepted everything before, with perhaps some initial resistance, but ultimate acquiescence. Not this time. I slipped out the front door and ordered a rideshare back to my apartment near campus. As the car pulled away from my childhood home, I felt something shifting within me, not just anger or hurt, but a cold, clear determination. They had taken something that was mine, something I had earned, something I had legal right to, and I was going to get it back. Back in my apartment, I spread my documentation across the kitchen table, the car title with my name clearly listed as owner, insurance payments from my bank account, receipts for maintenance I'd performed over the past year. The evidence of my ownership was undeniable and comprehensive. I created a spreadsheet detailing every aspect of the car situation: purchase price, date acquired, maintenance costs, current Blue Book value. The methodical process helped channel my emotions into something productive, transforming shock and betrayal into clear-eyed assessment. The facts were straightforward. I had purchased the Honda Civic 11 months ago for $8,750, paid from my own savings. The title was in my name only. I had paid for insurance, oil changes, new tires in February, and a brake job last month. The car was, without question, legally mine. What was less clear was how to proceed. The obvious course, reporting the vehicle as stolen, felt extreme, a nuclear option that would demolish whatever remained of my relationship with my family. Yet allowing my parents to give away my property set a dangerous precedent, one that devalued not just my possessions but my autonomy. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Tara. Hey, are you mad? Mom said you seemed upset about the car thing. I thought they told you about it ages ago. I stared at the message, its casual tone so disconnected from the magnitude of what had happened. Ages ago. So Tara had known about this plan while I remained in the dark, driving my car back to campus after spring break, unaware it would be given away before I returned. I set the phone aside without responding. This wasn't about Tara, not really. She was benefiting from our parents' decision, but she hadn't initiated the theft. The responsibility lay with my parents, who had once again demonstrated that my sister's needs automatically outranked mine. I needed perspective from someone who wasn't entangled in my family dynamics. I called Morgan, my roommate who was interning at a law firm for the summer. They did what? Morgan's indignation was validating after my parents' dismissive attitude. That's literally theft, Joe. Your name is on the title. They can't just give your car to someone else. I know, I sighed, but it's complicated. It's my family. Family or not, they took your property without permission. What do you want to do about it? It was the right question. Not what should I do, or what would cause the least conflict, but what did I want? I want my car back, I said, the clarity of the statement surprising me. I worked hard for it. I need it. And I'm not okay with my parents deciding they can redistribute my possessions. Good, Morgan said firmly. Now you need to figure out the most effective way to make that happen. After we hung up, I continued my assessment, moving beyond the legal facts to evaluate the family dynamics at play. This wasn't an isolated incident, but the most tangible example of a pattern that had shaped my entire life. I created a second document, this one listing instances of preferential treatment that Tara had received over the years. Dance lessons while I was told academic clubs were free. A laptop for high school graduation while I received a desk lamp. Family vacations rescheduled around her competitions, but never my events. The pattern was stark when laid out chronologically, not just occasional favoritism, but a consistent message. Tara's pursuits were investments. Mine were indulgences. I had accepted this narrative for years, worked around it, compensated for it by becoming fiercely independent. That independence had become my identity, my protection against the knowledge that I would always come second in my parents' priorities. But the car crossed a line. It wasn't an emotional slight or a matter of attention. It was my legal property, purchased with my money, necessary for my daily life. As I reviewed the evidence, both legal and emotional, I began to outline potential approaches. 1. Report the car stolen, extreme, relationship destroying, but legally justified. 2. Send a formal demand letter for the car's return, serious, potentially effective, keeps legal options open. 3. Confront parents directly with documentation, direct approach, likely to meet resistance. 4. Seek family mediation, time-consuming, focuses on emotions rather than legal rights. 5. Accept loss and request financial compensation, surrenders property rights, reinforces problematic pattern. As I weighed each option, I tried to anticipate my parents' reactions. They would likely dismiss a direct confrontation, falling back on family decisions and Tara's greater need. A formal letter might shock them enough to take the situation seriously. Reporting the car stolen would be effective but devastating. I needed to be strategic, to approach this as a negotiation rather than an emotional conflict. I needed to remember that regardless of family dynamics, I had legal rights that couldn't be brushed aside with appeals to Tara's future or family sacrifice. By evening, I had my assessment complete, a clear understanding of my legal position, the dynamics at play, and the potential paths forward. The violation still hurt, the betrayal still stung, but these emotions were now contained within a framework of action rather than helplessness. As I was reviewing my documents one final time, my phone rang. My mother's name flashed on the screen. Audrey? Her voice was strained. Are you coming back for dinner? Your father and I thought we could discuss the car situation more calmly. I'm back at my apartment, I replied. I needed space to think. You just left without saying anything. The familiar note of disapproval. Audrey, that's quite childish. The irony wasn't lost on me, being called childish for removing myself from a situation where my property had been taken without my consent. I'll be in touch about the car, I said, my voice steady. I need to consider my options. Options? She sounded genuinely confused. What options? We've already explained the situation to you. You've explained your decision, I corrected. But the car is legally mine, and I didn't consent to giving it to Tara. A pause. I think you're making this into something bigger than it needs to be. Family helps family. Tara needs the car more than you do right now. My name is on the title, I said simply. Not yours, not Dad's, not Tara's. Titles are just paperwork, she dismissed. This is about doing what's best for the family as a whole. I realized then that we were operating from fundamentally different premises. In her mind, family property was communal, to be allocated according to parental judgment regardless of who had paid for it. In my mind, and in the law, ownership was determined by legal documentation and financial investment. I'll be in touch, I repeated and ended the call. As I set my phone down, I felt an unexpected calm. The assessment was complete. I understood exactly where I stood, both legally and within my family's dysfunctional system. I was not powerless. I was not without options. My car had been taken without permission, given to my sister because my parents decided she deserves it more. But what they failed to recognize was that their determination of desert didn't override my legal rights of ownership. It was time to prepare for what came next. The next morning, I called Jeremy Kim, a lawyer Morgan had recommended. His office was small but professional, decorated with diplomas and family photos rather than the intimidating artwork of larger firms. "So your parents gave your car to your sister without your permission," he summarized after I explained the situation. "And your name is the only one on the title?" "Yes," I confirmed, sliding a folder across his desk. "I've brought copies of all the documentation: title, insurance records, maintenance receipts, bank statements showing the purchase payment." Jeremy reviewed the documents methodically, nodding as he went. "This is very thorough. I can see why Morgan thought we'd work well together." He looked up. "What's your goal here, Audrey? What outcome are you hoping for?" It was a good question, one I had spent hours considering the night before. "I want my car back," I said simply. "It's my property, I worked hard for it, and I need it. But I also don't want to completely destroy my relationship with my family if that's avoidable." He nodded. "A balanced approach, then. Let me outline your options." For the next 20 minutes, Jeremy explained the legal pathways available to me, from a formal demand letter to small claims court to reporting the vehicle stolen. Each option came with different levels of escalation and potential consequences. "Given your desire to maintain some family relationship, I'd recommend starting with a formal demand letter," he advised. "It establishes the seriousness of the situation while giving your parents an opportunity to correct their actions before legal proceedings begin." What should the letter include? A clear statement of ownership, documentation of the vehicle's value, a firm deadline for its return, and the consequences if they fail to comply. He opened his laptop. "I can draft it now if you'd like." While Jeremy worked on the letter, I prepared for the other aspects of the confrontation I knew would follow. I created a document with anticipated arguments from my parents and factual, unemotional responses. "It's just a car. It's my legal property that I purchased with my own money. Tara needs it more. My need for transportation doesn't disappear because Tara also needs transportation. We're your parents. Parental authority doesn't include the right to take my legal property. Don't be selfish. Protecting my legal rights isn't selfish. Taking someone else's property without permission is." I reviewed these responses, refining them to remove any hint of accusation or emotional appeal. This wasn't about hurt feelings or family dynamics. It was about property rights and respect for boundaries. Next, I set up practical contingencies. I arranged a carpool with a coworker for my shifts at the bookstore in case the car wasn't returned immediately. I documented the current odometer reading from my last oil change receipt to track any excessive use. I made a copy of the spare key I kept in my apartment. Jeremy finished the letter, reviewing it with me paragraph by paragraph. It was perfectly calibrated, professional without being cold, firm without being threatening, clear about my ownership and expectations without unnecessary emotion. "This establishes a paper trail," he explained as I signed the letter. "If we need to escalate to legal action, this demonstrates that you attempted to resolve the situation reasonably." "How should I deliver it?" I asked, considering the impact of receiving such a formal document from one's daughter. "Typically, certified mail provides the best documentation of receipt," Jeremy advised. "But given the family relationship, you might consider delivering it in person, though only if you can do so calmly and with witnesses present." I thought about my parents' likely reaction to receiving a legal letter in the mail versus hearing the same information directly from me. Both options had risks, but personal delivery would at least give me the opportunity to gauge their immediate response. "I'll deliver it myself," I decided. "But I'll have someone with me." On the way back to my apartment, I stopped at a copy shop to make multiple copies of all documentation. One set for my records, one for Jeremy to keep on file, one to bring to the confrontation. I organized everything in labeled folders, a system that helped maintain my focus on facts rather than emotions. My phone had been buzzing periodically throughout the day, more texts from Tara, now sensing something was seriously wrong. And several missed calls from both parents. I hadn't responded to any of them, needing to complete my preparation before engagement, Back at my apartment, I found Morgan waiting, concern evident in her expression. How did it go with Jeremy? Well, I said, showing her the letter. He thinks my case is straightforward from a legal perspective. She read it quickly, nodding. This is perfect, professional, but unmistakably serious. She looked up. When are you going to deliver it? Tomorrow, I decided. I need one more night to prepare. I hesitated. Would you come with me? I'd like to have a witness and someone who can help me stay focused if things get emotional. Absolutely, Morgan agreed without hesitation. What time? We settled on late morning, early enough to catch my parents before they might leave for errands, late enough to give me time for final preparations. That evening, I rehearsed the upcoming confrontation, anticipating various scenarios and practicing my responses. I reminded myself repeatedly, this is about my property rights, not about family dynamics or comparative worth. I visualized myself remaining calm regardless of what emotional tactics my parents might employ. Finally, I allowed myself to consider the potential outcomes. Best case, my parents would recognize their error, return the car, and we would begin a long overdue conversation about the pattern of favoritism that had shaped our family. Worst case, they would refuse, forcing me to escalate to legal action and potentially causing a permanent rift. Most likely, something in between. Initial resistance followed by reluctant compliance when they realized I was serious about pursuing my legal rights. As I prepared for bed, I received one final text from Tara. Mom and Dad are really upset. What's going on? Why aren't you answering anyone? I considered ignoring this message too, but decided a brief response might prevent further escalation before I was ready. I'm addressing the car situation. We'll talk tomorrow. Her reply came immediately. What car situation? I thought they arranged everything with you. The genuine confusion in her message confirmed what I had suspected. Tara had been told I had agreed to this arrangement. She wasn't the villain in the story. She was another player in the dynamic our parents had created. I didn't respond further. Tomorrow would bring clarity for everyone involved. As I drifted toward sleep, I felt oddly calm. The shock and hurt remained, but they were now contained within a framework of action and purpose. I had assessed the situation, prepared my response, and was ready to advocate for myself with clarity and conviction. My car had been taken because my sister deserved it more. Tomorrow, I would challenge not just the action, but the underlying assumption that had informed it, that my property, my work, my rights were somehow less deserving of respect than my sister's. The preparation was complete. The confrontation awaited. The next morning dawned bright and clear, inappropriately cheerful for what lay ahead. Morgan arrived at 10:30, dressed in a casual but professional outfit that subtly reinforced the seriousness of our mission. I wore something similar, instinctively understanding that appearance could influence how my parents received my message. Ready? Morgan asked as we prepared to leave. I nodded, picking up the folder containing the demand letter and supporting documentation. As ready as I'll ever be. The drive to my parents' house took 20 minutes of reviewing strategy, anticipating reactions, and steeling myself for the confrontation to come. We had agreed that Morgan would remain silent unless directly addressed, her presence serving primarily as witness and support. Both my parents' cars were in the driveway when we arrived. My Honda, my car, was conspicuously absent. Likely with Tara at her internship, my mother answered the door, her expression shifting from surprise to wariness when she saw Morgan behind me. Audrey, we've been trying to reach you. I know, I said evenly. May we come in? I'd like to speak with you and Dad. She hesitated, glancing again at Morgan with barely concealed suspicion. Who's this? This is my friend Morgan. She's here as a witness for our conversation. My mother's face tightened. A witness? Audrey, this is a family matter. It's a legal matter concerning my property, I corrected gently. And I'd prefer to have someone present who isn't emotionally involved. After a moment's clear internal debate, she stepped aside, calling over her shoulder, Robert. Audrey's here. With a friend. My father emerged from his study, reading glasses perched on his nose, his expression a mixture of irritation and confusion that suggested I had interrupted something important. His eyes narrowed slightly at the sight of Morgan. "What's this about?" he asked, although his tone indicated he already suspected. "Let's sit down," I suggested, gesturing toward the dining room table, a neutral space, more formal than the living room where family discussions typically took place. Once seated, I placed the folder on the table, its presence a tangible reminder of the seriousness of the situation. My parents exchanged a glance that conveyed their growing realization that this wasn't going to be a typical family disagreement. "I'm here to formally request the return of my car," I began, my voice steady despite the tension coiling in my chest. As the legal owner, I never consented to it being given to Tara or anyone else. My father let out an exasperated sigh. "Audrey, we've been over this. I understand that Tara needs transportation," I interrupted, something I rarely did with my father. "But the Honda Civic is legally my property. I purchased it with my own money, and my name is the only one on the title." "We're your parents," my mother said, as if this simple fact overrode all other considerations. "We were making a decision for the good of the family. Being my parents doesn't give you the legal right to take my property without permission." I opened the folder and removed the title document, placing it on the table between us. "This confirms that I am the sole owner of the vehicle." My father barely glanced at it. "This isn't about legalities, Audrey. This is about being part of a family where everyone contributes to the greater good." "I've always contributed," I replied calmly. "I've been financially independent since I started college. I've never asked for help with tuition, housing, or any other expenses. I worked 3 jobs to save for that car." "And we're very proud of your independence," my mother said, her tone shifting to the placating one she used when trying to defuse tension. "But Tara's at a crucial point in her development. This internship could open doors that will shape her entire career." I nodded, acknowledging her concern without accepting its premise. "I understand the importance of Tara's internship. But taking my car without permission wasn't the only solution. You could have helped her find transportation alternatives, just as I've always been expected to do." "It's just a car," my father said dismissively. "You're making this into something bigger than it needs to be." "It's my car," I corrected. "Purchased with my money, registered in my name, necessary for my job and daily life." A heavy silence fell over the table. My parents seemed genuinely perplexed by my insistence on what they clearly viewed as a technicality. The concept that legal ownership might override parental authority appeared foreign to them. "I've had a formal letter prepared," I continued, removing it from the folder and sliding it across the table. "It outlines my ownership of the vehicle and requests its return within 48 hours. My mother stared at the letter without touching it. "A formal letter? To your own parents?" "Yes." I maintained eye contact, refusing to be shamed for protecting my rights. Because informal conversation didn't seem sufficient given that my property was taken without my knowledge or consent. My father picked up the letter, his expression darkening as he skimmed its contents. This is ridiculous. You're threatening legal action against your own family." "I'm requesting the return of my property," I clarified. "The letter outlines potential next steps if that request is denied." "Next steps," he repeated incredulously. "Like what? Suing us? Calling the police?" "I hope none of that will be necessary," I said, my voice softening slightly. "I'd prefer to resolve this within the family. But I need you to understand that I'm serious about my right to my own property." The front door opened then, and Tara walked in, freezing when she registered the tension in the room. Her eyes moved from our parents to me to Morgan, confusion evident in her expression. "What's going on?" she asked, setting down her bag. "Your sister is threatening legal action if we don't return the car to her," my mother said, her voice tight with disapproval. Tara's eyes widened. "What? Why?" I thought. She turned to me. "Mom and Dad said you agreed to let me use it since you're on campus, and I need it for the internship." The confirmation that my parents had lied to Tara, presenting the car transfer as a mutual agreement rather than a unilateral decision, wasn't surprising, but still stung. "I never agreed to anything," I said gently, directing my words to Tara rather than our parents. "I wasn't consulted. I came home and discovered my car was gone." "But..." Tara looked between our parents, dawning realization in her eyes. "You told me Audrey was fine with it." that she offered. My mother shifted uncomfortably. We knew she would want to help you succeed. She's always been so independent, so capable of handling things on her own. The familiar rationalization, my independence used as justification for unequal treatment, hung in the air between us. The car is legally mine, I said, redirecting the conversation. I purchased it with money I earned. I need it returned within 48 hours, as specified in the letter. Or what? My father challenged. Or I'll be forced to pursue legal remedies to recover my property. The bluntness of my statement seemed to finally penetrate. My parents exchanged a look that contained a complex mixture of emotions: anger, disbelief, and perhaps, finally, recognition that I was not going to back down. Tara broke the silence. I didn't know, she said, her voice small. I wouldn't have taken it if I'd known it wasn't okay with you. I nodded, acknowledging her sincerity. I know. This isn't about you, Tara. I'll drive it back tomorrow, she offered immediately. After my afternoon session. My father began to protest, but Tara cut him off with a gesture. No, Dad. It's Audrey's car. She paid for it. I can figure something else out for the internship. The simple, immediate acknowledgement of my ownership from Tara threw into sharp relief our parents' continued resistance. For the first time, I wondered if Tara had recognized the pattern of favoritism as clearly as I had, from the other side of it. Thank you, I said, gathering my documentation and standing to signal the end of the confrontation. I appreciate that, Tara. As Morgan and I walked to the door, my mother followed, her expression a mixture of hurt and bewilderment. Was all this really necessary, Audrey? The lawyer, the letter, bringing a stranger into family business. I turned to face her, maintaining the calm I had worked so hard to cultivate. Yes, it was. Because asking simply as your daughter hasn't been effective in the past. I left then, before she could respond, before my carefully constructed composure could crack. The confrontation had gone almost exactly as I had anticipated: initial dismissal, appeal to family obligation, attempt to shame me for taking formal action. And, ultimately, reluctant recognition that I would not be swayed. A.S. Morgan drove us away from my childhood home. I felt a complex mixture of emotions: sadness for the relationship dynamic that had made such a confrontation necessary, relief that it was over, pride in my ability to stand firm without descending into accusation or anger. You did really well, Morgan said quietly. That couldn't have been easy. It wasn't, I admitted. But it was necessary. The confrontation was complete. The car would be returned. But I knew that what had truly been confronted went far deeper than a dispute over property. I had challenged a family dynamic that had defined my entire life, one in which my independence was used to justify unequal treatment rather than being recognized as the necessity it had always been. And in that challenge, something fundamental had shifted, not just in how my family saw me, but in how I saw myself. The fallout began almost immediately after I left my parents' house. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. I hope you're satisfied with how you've upset everyone. Your father and I are deeply hurt by your lack of trust and family feeling. I didn't respond. The message was exactly what I had expected, focusing on their hurt feelings rather than acknowledging their violation of my rights. Any reply would only extend an unproductive exchange. Tara's message, arriving minutes later, struck a different tone. I'm so sorry, Audrey. I really didn't know they hadn't talked to you about the car. I'll bring it back tomorrow afternoon. Can we talk after? I replied to her, yes, we can talk. And I know you weren't trying to take something that wasn't offered. Morgan dropped me at my apartment with a promise to check in later. Alone, I took stock of my emotional state. The adrenaline of confrontation was fading, leaving behind a heavy mixture of relief and sadness. I had stood my ground, but at a cost to relationships that, despite their flaws, still mattered to me. The next morning brought a voicemail from my father. Audrey, this formal legal approach is completely unnecessary. We raised you better than this. Call us when you're ready to discuss this reasonably as family. Again, I didn't respond. The message revealed that he still viewed my insistence on my property rights as unreasonable, my approach as a betrayal of family values rather than a response to their actions. BY mid-afternoon, The family grapevine had begun to vibrate. My aunt, my mother's sister, called, her voice carefully neutral. Your mother mentioned there's some tension about Tara using your car. Anything I can help with? I recognized the information-gathering mission for what it was. It's being resolved, I said simply. Tara's returning the car today. That's good. A pause. Your mom seems pretty upset about how it's all unfolded. I imagine she is, I acknowledged without elaboration. She said you brought a lawyer into it? That seems extreme. I took a deep breath, preparing for the first of what would likely be many attempts to cast me as the unreasonable party. I consulted a lawyer about my legal rights after my property was taken without my permission. I don't consider that extreme. A longer pause. When you put it that way. My aunt sighed. Look, I know your parents can be traditional in their thinking, but they love you in their way. I know they do, I said. But love doesn't override legal ownership or the right to be consulted about my own property. After we hung up, I reflected on the conversation. My aunt hadn't immediately taken my parents' side, as I might have expected. Her recognition that my perspective had validity felt like the first small ripple of change in the larger family system. At 4:30, Tara texted, just parked the car outside your building. Keys are under the mat like you asked. I'm in the coffee shop across the street when you're ready to talk. I went down to check the car first. It was there, looking exactly as it had when I last saw it. I checked the odometer against my records. She had driven it about 200 miles in the days since it had been taken. Reasonable for her commute to the internship. The gas tank was full, a small gesture of restitution that I appreciated. At the coffee shop, Tara sat hunched over a mug, looking younger and more vulnerable than her 20 years. She glanced up when I entered, her expression a mixture of guilt and uncertainty. Hey, she said as I slid into the seat across from her. Car's all good. Yes, thank you for bringing it back. I kept my tone neutral, neither accusatory nor overly warm. I really am sorry, she began. When Mom and Dad told me I could use your car for the internship, they made it sound like you had offered. Like you were happy to help. She looked down at her mug. I should have checked with you directly. Yes, you should have, I agreed. But I understand why you didn't. She looked up, relief evident in her expression. So we're okay? We are, I assured her. This isn't really about you, Tara. It's about a pattern that's existed our whole lives. She nodded slowly. I know. I've always known, even though we never talk about it. Her simple acknowledgement caught me off guard. I had expected defensiveness, perhaps even resentment at having to return the car. I hadn't expected awareness. You've known that Mom and Dad treat us differently? Yeah. She twisted her mug in a circle. It's always been weird. Like, I get all this support and attention and resources, and you get independence. Like it's supposed to be a gift, but really it's just them not showing up for you the way they do for me. The accuracy of her assessment, the exact pattern I had documented but never spoken aloud to her, was startling. And how does that make you feel? She considered this. Guilty sometimes. Confused. Frustrated that they create this weird competition between us that neither of us asked for. She looked up. But mostly sad, I think. Because we could have been closer all these years if they hadn't set things up this way. Something tight in my chest loosened at her words. The gap between us, one I had always attributed to her willing participation in our parents' favoritism, was perhaps not what I had assumed. I've never resented you, I said, wanting to be clear on this point. I've resented the situation, the unfairness of it. But not you personally. I know. She smiled slightly. You've always been kind to me, even when it would have been easy not to be. She hesitated. About the internship transportation. I'm trying to figure out alternatives. Dad's furious about having to drive me, but that's not your problem. No, it's not, I agreed, then found myself adding, but maybe we could work something out. A formal arrangement where you borrow the car certain days, with proper insurance and gas money. The offer surprised me as much as it seemed to surprise her. But it felt right, a way to maintain my boundaries while still supporting a sister who, I was realizing, was as much shaped by our parents' dysfunctional system as I was. Really? You'd do that after everything? I would. But it would need to be an actual agreement, not just an open-ended arrangement. And between us, not involving mom and dad. She nodded quickly. Absolutely. Whatever terms you want to set. We spent the next 20 minutes outlining a basic car-sharing arrangement, specific days, insurance responsibilities, maintenance contributions. The process was refreshingly straightforward, two adults making a reasonable accommodation that respected both parties' needs. As we parted, Tara hugged me impulsively. I'm sorry it took something this dramatic for us to really talk. Me too, I said, meaning it. That evening, my phone lit up with a text from my father. Your mother and I have discussed the situation. While we still believe you've blown this out of proportion, we recognize that legally the car is yours. We expect you'll help your sister with transportation now that you've made your point. No apology. No acknowledgement of the violated boundary. Just a grudging concession to legal reality coupled with a continued expectation that my resources would be available for Tara. I showed the message to Morgan when she stopped by to check on me. Classic non-apology, she observed. Acknowledging the bare minimum while still making it your responsibility to fix the situation. I've already worked out an arrangement with Tara directly, I told her. But I'm not going to tell them that. It's between her and me. Good boundary, Morgan approved. What are you going to say to them? I considered the question carefully. Nothing for now. They haven't actually asked a question or requested a response. They've just stated their expectation. And if they follow up, then I'll be clear that any arrangement between Tara and me is separate from my relationship with them and that I'm still processing the breach of trust. Morgan nodded. Clear, firm, but not punitive. Very you. The fallout continued to spread through extended family channels. My grandmother called, her concern evident. Your mother says you've threatened to take legal action against the family. What's happening, Audrey? I explained the situation simply, without embellishment or accusation. To my surprise, my grandmother didn't immediately side with my parents. They took your car without asking, she clarified. The one you paid for yourself? Yes. A long pause. Well, that wasn't right. Another pause. I love your parents dearly, but sometimes they have blind spots where you're concerned. It was the most direct acknowledgement of the pattern I had ever received from anyone in the family besides Tara. The validation, coming from such an unexpected source, felt like a crucial piece of external reality checking. Thank you for saying that, Grandma. As the week progressed, the immediate crisis receded. The car was back in my possession. Tara and I had established a new, more intentional relationship, and various family members had been forced to at least partially confront the dynamics that had led to the situation, but the deeper fallout. The permanent shift in how I was perceived within the family system and how I perceived myself was just beginning to take shape. I had moved from the role of compliant, independent daughter to someone who would enforce boundaries and insist on respect for her autonomy. It was a necessary evolution, but one that carried both liberation and loss. The freedom of newly established boundaries coupled with the sadness of recognizing that they had been necessary in the first place. The period of relative calm lasted exactly 9 days before my father launched his counteroffensive. It began with an email, its formal tone a pointed mirror of the legal letter I had presented during our confrontation. Audrey, your mother, and I have reviewed our financial records and compiled a list of expenses we have covered for you over the years. These include medical insurance until age 26, cell phone service through your undergraduate years, and the security deposit for your first apartment. While we provided these supports freely at the time, your recent legalistic approach to family matters has caused us to reconsider. Attached is an itemized statement of these expenses, which we now consider loans to be repaid. I stared at the email, then at the attached spreadsheet listing expenses totaling just over $9,000, a sum clearly calculated to exceed the value of my car. The message was unmistakable. If I insisted on legal ownership and boundaries, they would respond in kind, recasting years of normal parental support as debt. It was a clumsy attempt at leverage, transparent in its retaliatory intent. But it still stung, this quantification of what had apparently been conditional love all along. I forwarded the email to Jeremy, who called within the hour. This is unenforceable, he assured me. Parental support for a minor child is legally obligated, not optional. And even the post-18 expenses would be nearly impossible to recharacterize as loans without documentation of that intent at the time they were provided. So I can just ignore it. Legally, yes. Though I understand that family dynamics make it more complicated than that. I thanked him and sat with the dilemma. Engaging with my father's financial countermove would only extend a conflict that was fundamentally about control, not money. Ignoring it might be interpreted as concession. Neither option felt satisfactory. Morgan, reviewing the email later, cut to the heart of the matter. This isn't really about getting money from you. It's about regaining the upper hand. I know, I sighed. It's so transparent, but still effective at getting under my skin. So what's your response? I considered the question carefully. Nothing yet. I need to see if this is an isolated attempt or part of a larger campaign. I didn't have to wait long for my answer. 2 days later, Tara called, her voice tight with anxiety. Did you know Dad called my internship supervisor? He told her I no longer had reliable transportation and might need scheduling accommodations. I winced at this new tactic, using Tara's internship as collateral damage in his attempt to reassert control. I'm sorry, Tara. That's completely inappropriate. It gets worse, she continued. When I confronted him, he said I should be asking you why my internship is at risk, since you're the one who demanded your car back. The attempt to drive a wedge between Tara and me was as predictable as it was disappointing. What did you say? I told him we'd already worked out a car-sharing arrangement and that he needed to call my supervisor back and fix this. Her voice hardened. I also told him I wasn't going to let him make me his weapon against you. Pride in my sister's clarity and strength surged through me. How did he respond? Not well, she admitted. He said I was being manipulated by you, that I didn't understand family loyalty. The same accusations that had been directed at me, now aimed at Tara for the crime of arranging her own transportation solution without parental mediation. I'm sorry you're caught in the middle of this. I'm not, though, she said firmly. I'm standing with you. There's a difference. After we hung up, I considered this new phase of the conflict. My father, finding his financial counterattack ineffective, had escalated to involving Tara's internship and attempting to undermine our newly strengthened relationship. It was a strategy born of desperation, a last grasp at control that was rapidly slipping away. That evening, an email arrived from my mother. A different approach, but clearly coordinated with my father's efforts. Audrey, I hope you've had time to reflect on how your actions have affected the family. Your father is deeply hurt by your legalistic approach to what should have been a simple family matter. Your grandmother called very upset after your conversation. And now Tara is caught between her internship needs and your inflexibility. I raised you to consider others, not just your own interests. I'm very disappointed in the choices you're making. The email hit all the familiar notes: appeal to family loyalty, invocation of others' feelings, reframing of boundary setting as selfishness. But something had changed in how these tactics affected me. Where once they would have triggered immediate guilt and self-doubt, now I could see them clearly for what they were: manipulations designed to bring me back into compliance with a system that had never truly respected my autonomy. I drafted a brief, factual response. Mom, Tara and I have already arranged a car-sharing solution that meets both our needs. Dad's call to her supervisor was unnecessary and potentially harmful to her internship. I'm open to rebuilding trust, but that will require acknowledgement of boundaries, not continued attempts to control a situation that has already been resolved. The reply came quickly. This isn't about control, it's about family. Why can't you see how your stubbornness is hurting everyone? I didn't respond further. The pattern was clear. Any boundary I established would be reframed as an attack. Any step toward independence cast as betrayal of family values. The counterattack continued through other channels. My aunt called again, this time more directly advocating for my parents' position. Your mother is beside herself, Audrey. Your father's blood pressure is through the roof. Is this car really worth tearing the family apart? The car was returned to me nearly 2 weeks ago, I pointed out. Tara and I have already worked out a sharing arrangement. The only ongoing conflict is my parents' refusal to acknowledge that taking my property without permission was wrong. They're your parents, she emphasized, as if this simple fact negated all other considerations. They've devoted their lives to giving you girls every advantage. I appreciate everything they've done for me, I said carefully. But that doesn't give them the right to take my car and give it to Tara without asking. My aunt sighed deeply. Family is about flexibility, Audrey. Sometimes we bend for the people we love. I agree, but bending needs to go both ways. I've spent my entire life accommodating my parents' preference for Tara's needs over mine. This time, I needed them to respect my property rights. There was a long pause. They say you've presented them with a bill for expenses they covered while you were growing up. That seems retaliatory. That's not accurate, I corrected. They sent me an itemized list of expenses, characterizing normal parental support as loans to be repaid. It was their response to my insistence on getting my car back. Oh! Another pause. They didn't mention that part. The conversation marked a turning point in the counterattack phase. My aunt, initially recruited as an ally in my parents' campaign, had encountered the limits of their narrative control. The discrepancy between their version of events and mine had created a crack in their united front. Similar conversations played out with other family members over the following week. Each time, the same pattern emerged: initial acceptance of my parents' framing, followed by reconsideration when confronted with the full context. The final and most dramatic phase of the counterattack came in the form of an ultimatum delivered by my father via email. Audrey, your continued disrespect and divisiveness leave us no choice. Either you apologize for your legalistic approach to the car situation and retract any claims about our family dynamics, or you will not be welcome at family gatherings until your attitude changes. This includes Thanksgiving and Christmas. The choice is yours. The email was copied to several family members, a public drawing of lines designed to force capitulation through the threat of holiday exclusion, a serious consequence in our family culture. I read the ultimatum several times, letting the reality of it settle. My father was demanding not just that I apologize for protecting my property rights, but that I retract my growing awareness of the family dynamics that had made such protection necessary in the first place. He was asking me to deny my own lived experience, to recommit to the fiction of equal treatment that had never existed. It was, I realized, the ultimate confirmation of everything I had started to understand. That my role in the family had always been conditional on my acceptance of a fundamentally unequal system. I showed the email to Morgan, who read it with growing indignation. This is next-level manipulation. He's basically saying deny reality or be excommunicated. I know. I felt strangely calm. It's clarifying in a way. What are you going to do? I considered the question, examining my options with the same methodical approach I had applied to the original car situation. I could capitulate, smooth things over with an apology I didn't mean. I could counter-escalate, perhaps by sharing his financial retaliation attempts with the extended family. I could ignore the ultimatum entirely, letting the silence speak for itself. None of these options aligned with the person I was becoming, someone who could stand firm in her truth without engaging in emotional warfare. I'm going to respond honestly, I decided. Not to the ultimatum itself, but to the underlying dynamic it represents. I composed my reply carefully, addressing not just my father, but all the family members included in his email. I love this family, despite its imperfections. I won't be apologizing for protecting my legal rights to property I purchased myself. I won't be retracting my growing understanding of family patterns that have shaped all our relationships. And I won't be engaging with ultimatums about holiday gatherings. My door remains open for genuine conversation about how we move forward with greater honesty and mutual respect. That conversation can't happen under threat of exclusion or demands to deny reality. I hope we can find a healthier way to be family. Until then, I'll be establishing the boundaries necessary for my own well-being. I hit send before I could second-guess myself, then turned off my phone. The counterattack had reached its zenith, my father's ultimatum representing the last and most desperate attempt to force me back into the role I had outgrown, whatever came next. I had maintained my integrity without descending into the same tactics being used against me. I had neither surrendered my truth nor weaponized it against others. The counterattack had failed. 3 days passed in silence after I sent my response to my father's ultimatum. No angry calls, no follow-up emails, no recruited family members attempting to mediate. Just a heavy, expectant quiet that felt both ominous and necessary. On the fourth day, my grandmother called. "I'm having lunch with your parents tomorrow," she said without preamble. "Is there anything you'd like me to convey?" I considered the question carefully. My grandmother had surprised me with her willingness to consider my perspective rather than automatically siding with my parents. Just that I'm open to conversation when they're ready to acknowledge that taking my car without permission was wrong. "Simple enough," she said. "No conditions about apologies or anything like that?" "No. Just recognition of the basic boundary violation." She made a soft humming sound. "You know, when your mother was young, your grandfather, and I once took her stereo and gave it to her cousin who was going through a difficult time. We didn't ask first, just assumed she'd want to help family." I waited, sensing there was more to the story. "She didn't speak to us for 2 weeks. Then your grandfather acknowledged we should have asked. That was the end of it." My grandmother paused. History has a way of repeating itself in families. The story, this small window into my mother's own experience of having boundaries violated by well-meaning parents, shifted something in my understanding. Perhaps her resistance to acknowledging my property rights wasn't just about control or favoritism. Perhaps it was also about confronting patterns she herself had internalized long ago. "Thank you for telling me that," I said. "It helps to have context." "Sometimes we pass down the very things we once resented," my grandmother observed, without even realizing it. After we hung up, I reflected on this new dimension of the family dynamic. It didn't excuse my parents' actions or minimize the harm of their favoritism, but it offered a more nuanced understanding of how such patterns persist across generations. 2 days later, an email arrived from my father, brief, formal, but markedly different in tone from his previous communications. "Audrey." After further consideration and conversation with several family members, I recognized that taking your car without consultation was an error in judgment. While our intention was to support Tara's opportunities, we should have discussed the matter with you directly as the vehicle's legal owner. Please let us know when you might be available to talk further. The acknowledgement was minimal, an error in judgment, rather than a violation of boundaries, without consultation, rather than without permission. But it was unmistakably a concession, an acceptance of the basic reality I had been insisting on all along. I waited a day before responding, wanting to be sure my reply came from a place of clarity rather than relief or residual anger. "Thank you for acknowledging that the car should not have been taken without discussion. I'm available to meet this weekend if that works for you." We arranged to meet at a cafe, neutral territory that would help maintain the new, more formal boundaries I had established. I arrived early, selecting a corner table that offered some privacy without isolation. My parents entered together, my mother scanning the room anxiously while my father maintained the stiff posture that signaled his discomfort. I stood to greet them, accepting my mother's brief hug and my father's awkward nod. "Thank you for meeting us," my mother began once we were seated. She glanced at my father, some unspoken communication passing between them. He cleared his throat. "Your grandmother shared some perspective that was illuminating about patterns in families." "She mentioned something similar to me," I acknowledged. "We've always wanted the best for both you girls," my mother said, her voice earnest. "We never meant to create an uneven dynamic." I nodded, neither agreeing nor challenging the statement. "I understand your intentions, but the impact has been a pattern where Tara's needs are automatically prioritized, and my independence is used to justify not offering me the same support." My father shifted uncomfortably. "You've always been so capable. So self-sufficient." "I had to be," I said simply. A silence settled over the table, heavy with decades of unspoken truths. "We can't change the past," my mother finally said. "But perhaps we can do better moving forward." It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even a full acknowledgement of the pattern I had named. But it was an opening, a crack in the defensive armor that had protected them from recognizing their role in creating the family dynamic. "I'd like that," I said. "Starting with respecting each other's boundaries and property." My father nodded stiffly. "Agreed." We talked for another hour, careful and measured, each of us navigating the new terrain of more conscious relationship. None of the underlying patterns had been fully dismantled. None of the hurt had been completely healed. But something had shifted, a silent agreement to see each other more clearly, to acknowledge realities that had long been denied. As we prepared to leave, my mother asked hesitantly, "Will you come for Thanksgiving?" I considered the question, weighing the progress made against the work still to be done. Yes, I decided, but I'll drive myself. It was a small boundary, almost humorous in its simplicity. But it represented something vital, my continued commitment to independence, not as a burden to bear or a consequence of being less favored, but as a strength I had built and now claimed by choice. The resolution wasn't perfect. Real life rarely offers the neat conclusions of storybooks. But it was authentic, a genuine step toward healthier relationship, built on the foundation of my unwavering insistence on respect for my autonomy. My car had been returned. A basic boundary had been acknowledged. A conversation about deeper patterns had begun. It was enough for now. 1 year after the confrontation over my car, I stood in the driveway of my parents' home, watching Tara load camping gear into the very Honda Civic that had once been the center of so much conflict. We were headed to a weekend hiking trip, just the two of us, a sister adventure that would have been unimaginable before the events that had forced our family to face its dysfunctional patterns. "Is that everything?" I asked as she secured the trunk. "I think so." She grinned, excitement evident in her expression. "I still can't believe you convinced me to go camping." "Technically, it's glamping," I corrected. "The cabins have real beds and electricity." "Still." "Mosquitoes. Potential bears. Potential mores," I countered. "Potential stargazing." She laughed, the sound easy and uninhibited in a way our interactions rarely had been before the car incident. Fair point. Our relationship had transformed over the past year, evolving from the distant, somewhat competitive dynamic our parents had fostered into something genuine and equal. The car-sharing arrangement had been the beginning, a practical necessity that had created space for regular contact outside our parents' influence. Those interactions had grown from brief car exchanges to coffee conversations to real friendship. My relationship with our parents had also changed, though less dramatically. The acknowledgement of boundary violation had created an opening for more honest communication, but old patterns resurfaced regularly. My mother still occasionally slipped into comparing us. My father still bristled at direct challenges to his authority. But now these moments were recognized, sometimes addressed, never allowed to pass as normal or acceptable. The most profound change, however, was within me. The young woman who had once accepted unequal treatment as inevitable, who had built independence out of necessity rather than choice, had been replaced by someone who understood her worth, protected her boundaries, and chose self-advocacy over peacekeeping. My mother emerged from the house, carrying a small cooler. "I made sandwiches for your drive," she said, handing it to Tara. "And there's some fruit and those protein bars Audrey likes." This small gesture, remembering my preferences, including me in her nurturing without being asked, represented progress. Not dramatic transformation, but genuine effort. "Thanks, Mom," I said, accepting the thoughtfulness for what it was. My father appeared in the doorway, characteristically hanging back slightly. Our relationship remained the most strained, his difficulty acknowledging the favoritism pattern creating an undercurrent of tension that flared occasionally into open conflict. "You've got good weather for the drive," he observed. "Should be clear all weekend." "That's what the forecast said," I agreed, matching his neutral tone. Tara glanced between us, then announced brightly, "I'm going to grab my pillow. Back in a sec." As she disappeared into the house, my father stepped forward. "That car's holding up well," he said, nodding toward the Honda. "You've taken good care of it." "I have," I agreed. "It was a significant investment." He nodded, a familiar discomfort flickering across his features at the reminder of the conflict that had forced our family to confront its dynamics. "Audrey," he began, then stopped, seeming to reconsider his words. "Have a good trip. Drive safely." "We will," I promised, accepting the truncated sentiment for the effort it represented. The past year had taught me to recognize progress without demanding perfection, to acknowledge small steps toward healthier relationship while maintaining the boundaries necessary for my own well-being. Tara returned, pillow in hand, and our parents waved us off with the usual admonitions to call when we arrived and drive carefully. As we pulled out of the driveway, I felt a familiar mixture of relief and residual tension, the emotional signature of family visits that might never completely fade. "That wasn't too bad," Tara observed as we turned onto the main road. "No," I agreed. "It was fine." She glanced at me, her expression thoughtful. "You know, I was thinking about it the other day, how everything changed because of your car. If they hadn't taken it, if you hadn't stood up for yourself, we might still be stuck in the same old patterns." I considered this counterfactual, the path not taken. Maybe. Or maybe something else would have eventually forced the issue. Maybe. She was quiet for a moment. "I'm glad it happened, though. Not the hurt part, but the change part. I like who we are now to each other, to ourselves." I smiled, touched by her perception. "Me too." As we drove toward the mountains, music playing and conversation flowing easily between us, I reflected on the journey of the past year. The car that had been taken because my sister deserved it more had become the vehicle, literally and metaphorically, for transformation, carrying us toward a new understanding of ourselves and each other. The new beginning wasn't about erasing the past or pretending the hurt hadn't happened. It was about building something different on the foundation of truth that had been uncovered through conflict, the truth that I deserved respect, that boundaries mattered, that patterns could be recognized and changed. IT was about claiming the right to define my own worth, rather than accepting others' assessment of it, and perhaps most importantly, it was about discovering that standing firm in that worth didn't have to mean standing alone.